Hi, Mehdi Sunderji, and welcome to Your Finance TV's Crypto Revolution, where we cover all things crypto and digital assets. And welcome back, Adam, co-founder at Interaxis.
Good to be back, Mehdi. Of course, there's always stuff going on. We've missed out on a little bit, but the crypto world keeps pushing on.
The crypto world does keep pushing on, and there's it's been 2 weeks since we last spoke, and there's definitely been a few headlines along the way, maybe even longer. Has it been 3 weeks?
I think it's been about 3 weeks. We
Yeah. Oh
totally
my
missed
gosh.
Thanksgiving, man.
Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving, buddy.
You too.
So before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe. We're through 5,000 subscribers and growing every day. So stay on top of our content. And again, always feel free to drop us a line if there's anything you want us to discuss. But as we said, we've missed 3 weeks of crypto chat, and let's catch up on everything that's been happening, and a lot's been happening. So obviously we had the FTX debacle over the last 12 months, and that's got its own little saga on one side. But Binance has been popping in and out of the news over the last several months, and now CZ, the CEO, has been, he's been pointed out and picked, and he's now stepped down. He's paying fines. Binance themselves are paying fines. There's money laundering violations. There's all sorts of things going on here. So, Adam, why don't you bring us up to speed on what's happening in the world of Binance and CZ?
Yeah, it's really interesting that if there weren't for all the other crypto related frauds and scandals, this would be huge, right? But crypto just kind of took it and said, all right, whatever. Not a big deal. So, Binance had been investigated by the SEC. There are charges of money laundering. The main charges really are not that they were particularly laundering money, but that they didn't put the appropriate anti-money laundering measures in place. And we all kind of knew that about Binance. And anyone who ever used Binance for the past few years knew this. They would say, look, there's Binance and there's Binance US. And if they're in the US, you can't use regular Binance, except wink, wink, nudge, nudge if you have a VPN. They also would allow, countries that were sanctioned like Iran to be able to use their network. And so the US and the SEC obviously were not too happy with that. So finally, instead of going through lengthy court battles and everything, I think Binance knew they had done these things. I think instead of going through all that, they said, look, we'll pay the fine. Changpeng Zhao, who's the founder of Binance, goes by CZ, will agree to step down as CEO. They paid a $4.3 billion fine. Their compliance officer also personally had to pay a fine. CZ had to personally pay a fine, and they said, we're not even going to fight. It's not worth it for us. CZ steps down. He still has, all his ownership of the company. He actually is, as far as I know, still in Washington, as in the state of Washington, because the judge has said you can't leave until we sentence you. And I believe I've read it could be anywhere from probation to 10 years in prison, something like that. So he basically said, look, I want Binance to keep going. And this is my read on it, right? I want Binance to keep going. He obviously is still worth billions of dollars because of his equity in Binance. He said, I want to concentrate more on DeFi. I want to concentrate more on crypto, because obviously he doesn't want his concentration and the time and effort of Binance to be 100% centered on how do we fight the SEC? How do we become regulatory compliant in the US? We have so much business elsewhere in the world. Let's devote our time to that. And for them, I guess they decided it's worth $4.3 billion to basically put this behind them. And that's kind of what they did. Is they said, here's the money. We know we did some things wrong. Here's $4.3 billion SEC. We're good. Fine CZ if you want, but he's not going to be the head anymore. But Binance and the rest of the world can continue to move on, because they're not going to have to devote all this time and energy and money and everything to fighting a court battle. And in that realm, the day that it happened, the day that we heard about it, which I think was last Monday, I think it was Monday of Thanksgiving week, the crypto markets fell a little bit and they picked right back up. I guess we're kind of used to this, unfortunately.
Well, but I think that's a very good point, right? So that's kind of what I was going to lead into. The fact is, we sold off, right? We saw the crypto market sell off, and then it kind of digested and kind of moved on. at the end of the day, what are the implications for the larger scale in the crypto market? Very limited, right? At the end of the day, the guys are
Yeah.
going to pay a fine, they're going to move on, and off they go, right? So pay the fine, CZ steps down in that control role. I personally think he'll probably get some jail time, but who knows? And he might be sharing, might have an SBF and a CZ wing at a jail somewhere. But it is what it is. But the bigger picture is that these guys have kind of the market digested and moved on, and we've seen the recovery in price. I think there's been some volatility along the way today and yesterday, but things are stable, right? And I think that's always the most comforting thing that we're seeing, that stability.
Well, and the thing about this one, Mehdi, unlike what we saw with Celsius and Voyager, with Three Arrows Capital, with SBF and FTX, is this was not a case of fraud. This was not a case where Binance didn't have the funds that people wanted to take out. It's not a case where they didn't have the liquidity. They didn't do things fraudulent for their depositors or for their users. It was they didn't fulfill the AML requirements that the SEC and the US government put in place. And so we don't have liquidity issues. We don't have an issue where someone's going to have to sell $10 billion worth of Bitcoin or something, that like we've seen in the past. This isn't one of those situations. And the crypto market digested that and said, look, Binance is still the largest source of liquidity in the world. They're going to be able to keep going on without this encumbrance. And honestly, I think CZ, whether he serves jail time or not, might end up being the single largest contributor to the crypto ecosystem, because he's got so much money now. He doesn't have to helm Binance. Whenever he gets out, he can go invest in all these projects. And I think already crypto has his thumbprint all over it, and it's going to even more. And he hasn't shown, in my opinion, and I think you and I probably talked in the same words about SBF, but he hasn't shown that he's trying to be fraudulent. I think, genuinely wants the crypto market to succeed. And yes, he became a billionaire in the process, but he hasn't tried to defraud anyone, short of telling people in the US you can use a VPN to access our liquidity, right? He hasn't tried to do that. Yes, they try to kind of create their own chain. Yes, they tried to move some DeFi protocols over to their own chain, but it hasn't been, in my opinion, in a fraudulent way. Something like that could come out at some point, but overall I think he's actually been good for the crypto world.
Well, and he was kind of instrumental along the way in highlighting some of the downsides on what was happening at FTX as well. So whether that, people can say that he was talking his own book and it was just helping his own case out as being number one and keeping their position and just getting rid of a competitor. But at the end of the day, it did bring a lot of the misgivings that were happening at FTX to the forefront. So
exactly.
Thanks for that, CZ.
Yeah. And again, as we said, interesting that this happened, and it was a tiny, tiny, tiny little blip in prices. And since then, people have hardly talked about it.
And because there's more positive things to talk about, right? There's been the ETF conversation continues on the Bitcoin ETF side, and that's kind of been one of the largest drivers of stability and the rising in price in Bitcoin. And we've seen now there's a bit more dialogue, two-way dialogue between the SEC and some of these applicants for the Bitcoin ETFs, where they are making amendments to try and address some of the concerns or questions and things that the SEC is bringing to the forefront. So, I personally, I kind of feel like there is every time that we see these types of things where they are talking, that the chances of an ETF being approved, or multiple obviously ETFs being approved, gets higher and higher along the way as there's this conversation. It's not just sitting in a bubble saying no or yes from the SEC. There is dialogue, and I personally see that as being a really positive sign in what's going to potentially happen. What about you?
I think it is. I think these companies are filing these amendments in response to conversations they're having with the SEC, and which must mean the SEC is saying, if you do this or if you do that, if you make these little changes, we'll get closer to approval, or we have these problems with your amendments. So it's not the SEC going, we're not going to talk to you until drop dead date, and then we're going to deny it. They're saying, we know we're approaching those dates, and you need to make these little changes, and they're making them. And what it's also leading to, Mehdi, is on Twitter and on LinkedIn and such. It's people kind of speculating every time there's some sort of back and forth, an amendment, a conversation. Everyone speculates maybe this is the week that it happens, or maybe they're going to just wait till January 10th and approve everyone. We're speculating on, based on what's happening with Grayscale, because theirs is a little bit different animal than everybody else's. So what it's causing is a lot of people just being watchers and looking at every single amendment, because they're all public information, and it's becoming almost a sport in itself.
Well, keep watching, people. Keep watching, and I'm all for this sport. It's great to watch. So, still in the Bitcoin world, there was a headline that popped up, which was kind of scary. I just saw a $3 million transaction fee pop up. What was all this about? Because it sounds crazy.
What it looks like is someone accidentally, when I send you Bitcoin, if I wanted to send you Bitcoin, I, choose an amount that I'm going to send, and some amount's going to you, and some amount is basically going to pay the transaction fee, pay the fee to the miner that actually processes the transaction. And it looks like someone made a little bit of a mistake, and for a $2 million sending $2 million worth of Bitcoin, ended up with a $3 million transaction fee. So the miner that processed it got $3 million worth of Bitcoin as like a tip, right? So I guess we can call it a Thanksgiving tip or a Christmas tip or something if you want. There's guys that go into Starbucks or go to a restaurant and leave a $1,000 tip for the wait staff. This was a $3 million tip for the transaction, the miner that processed the transaction. Pretty sure they didn't mean to do that. This has happened in the past, but it remains to be seen if the miner is going to, kind of refund most of the transaction fee for this one.
That'll be interesting to see, because I believe that if someone wanted to do this on purpose, like every other Muppet that's around there, they would have taken like a video of it to make sure that they posted it on social media.
Oh yeah, it was definitely
really happy.
Definitely an accident. And look, it's one of those negatives that people talk about, like this wouldn't happen if I were, sending dollars using Venmo or something like that. This could only happen in Bitcoin and with crypto. And it happens every so often, and it's not very often that something like this happens. And most wallets and most companies like Coinbase and Kraken have measures in place to make sure that you and I, like the casual user, doesn't do that. If someone's already sending $2 million worth of Bitcoin to someone else, they should know better, right? Like if you've accumulated over $5 million worth of Bitcoin and you're ready to send it somewhere, you should know better than that. And you're likely not using, the typical centralized custodians or centralized methods like Coinbase to send. You probably have your own wallets. You probably have your own security, safety protocols in place. And something happened and they just missed one. And look, I've missed transactions too. I've done things accidentally where I've paid too much in the crypto world. I've signed transactions I shouldn't have because I'm on the phone while I'm doing it, or my mind is somewhere else. And I've had to learn, when I'm going through transactions, I have to be focused on it a little bit. I have to make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So this is someone who should have had the protocols in place and apparently didn't, or just didn't follow them.
Well, hopefully lesson learned.
Yeah.
And if you're watching this and it was you, please feel free to give us a shout, and we'll run through it and tell us your story.
Right. And look, I'll take a $1 million tip. I'd be happy with that. I'd refund the other two.
I'll take a $500,000. There you go. Yeah. You're undercut already. That's what makes a market. So, Adam, away from Bitcoin stories and the bigger picture of the crypto inside and the DeFi universe, let's go back to traditional world, right? So obviously the stock market's been performing quite well over the last several weeks, and it's had a pretty decent run, slowly going into the end of the year. But let's talk crypto equities, because they've kind of been outperforming Bitcoin as well. And, they're all in that same ecosystem in a way, right? But there's talk us through some of the ones that have been outperforming and what your thoughts are around this.
Yeah, well, the one that's front and center in my mind is Coinbase, right? Because they have been, I think they're up, almost 300% for the year, if not more than that. They have just been, it's been crazy what's been happening with Coinbase. And I think people are realizing that Coinbase has many different revenue streams. There's transaction fees, of course. Now you can be a member of Coinbase One and you're paying a monthly fee. They also have their new layer 2 called Base, which is, has an incredible amount of volume going through it. So Coinbase is preparing itself to, have all these different income and revenue streams as crypto becomes more and more mainstream. We'll talk about security tokens. They'll likely, be custodying security tokens, and Coinbase is poised to, when ETFs are approved, they're going to be the custodian for several of these ETFs. So I think people are starting to realize they have a tremendous moat around them because they're a publicly traded company, because they haven't done anything fraudulent or wrong, really. They've fought the SEC and won. All of these things they have going for them that no one else has. And we're realizing, okay, their stock shouldn't necessarily be down so far when the rest of the crypto world seems to be picking up, when the likes of BlackRock say, not only do we want an ETF, but we're actually going to adopt and use the system. When Deutsche Bank and Citi and all the other ones that you and I have talked about, Mehdi, are going to be utilizing the crypto ecosystem, and Coinbase is right there poised to be the giant, and everyone's going, oh, well, obviously their stock price should go up because we think there's a lot of value there. And that's just Coinbase. Then you can look at others like the mining companies like Riot and Marathon Digital that are mining Bitcoin. Well, the only product they have is Bitcoin, and the value of their product is going up, and they don't have to expend any extra effort to do so. Why wouldn't the stock price goes up? It makes way too much sense that if the price of Bitcoin is up, whatever it is this year, over 100%, why shouldn't the mining company stocks go up as well? They're just producing more and more Bitcoin, and they're basically developing this system where they just keep getting the new miners. They have really low energy costs, and they just develop more Bitcoin. So what we're seeing is the ability for you and I, for anybody, even if they don't want to invest in Bitcoin or they can't invest in Bitcoin, they can invest in crypto-related publicly traded companies, and they've been outperforming crypto.
Yeah, I think Marathon's up a cheeky 260 odd percent as well, and pretty much same as year to date, same as Coinbase. That's up 260% year to date as well. So these guys, keep on plugging. It's a very good alternative, as you say, if you can't or you don't want to necessarily invest in Bitcoin itself. These are some alternatives to look at. So, and obviously we're not endorsing or encouraging anyone to buy stocks or Bitcoin. It's just we just want to highlight that these are alternatives out there that if you're looking at the ecosystem, check them out. Adam, I just got back from the UK, as I always say, my alma mater. But there seems to be some green lights going on there as well. There's UK investment funds are getting the green light for tokenization, and they're aiming to improve some of their efficiency and transparency and such. They're moving on ahead.
Right.
What do you think? Are we going to cut and paste this into the US here?
I have a funny feeling the U.S. isn't going to cut and paste anything as much as we wish they would. But we've talked before about how the EU and the UK are further ahead in regulation. They're pushing forward and saying, look, this is going to happen. We need to figure out how to regulate it, not only because we want to get our taxes and we want to make sure that everything's safe in terms of money laundering and not funding terrorists and everything else, but we want to make sure that we're providing a path for innovation. We're providing a path to where this technology can be utilized for greater efficiency and greater transparency and all the other things that we want as part of it. And so, I forget what they call it's not the finance ministry, but someone, created this paper that basically said, here's how we're going to go forward with regulating tokenized assets, with putting funds, especially, publicly traded funds, onto a public blockchain. Here's how we're going to go about doing it. And I believe it was a collaboration between industry, kind of the fund industry, and the finance ministry over there that kind of got together and wrote this paper.
The UK Treasury.
The UK Treasury. I apologize. The That's UK right. Treasury. Thank you for helping me out with your terminology.
There we go. But yeah, no, this is great, right? So I was very excited to see this come across, and just talking to people in the UK, everyone seems very, very, everyone's focus, as you say, there's more and more clarity that comes out every step along the way in how the government seeing these things, these digital assets and such, and what it will mean from a tax perspective, and how you can position yourself in your portfolios and investment styles. So, good for them. They're plugging away, and as is the rest of Europe, obviously the Middle East, Asia,
Yeah.
US
Everyone but here, everywhere but here, right?
Yeah, that's how I was basically getting there. Yeah, but it's everyone apart from here.
Right. And look, the important thing to realize about these is these funds, and we say this all the time to financial advisors, why you have to know about this, because these funds, they're not going to be volatile like Bitcoin and ETH are. They're still going to be the funds. We're just going to use a public blockchain to track ownership and track the assets, which is likely going to make them more transparent. It's likely going to make it to where you and I can custody those. We can hold on to those without going through a centralized custodian potentially. So there are going to be aspects of blockchain technology that are going to help make those funds, potentially more efficient, again, more transparent, hopefully lower fees, those kinds of things. And as financial professionals, you're just going to have to know how to help investors. As an investor, look, honestly, not a whole lot is going to change. The funds are going to be the funds. You might have more purview. You might have more understanding about what is going into those funds, about what they're investing in, where your money is going, and therefore a better idea of where it fits in your portfolio.
And I feel like every other word in these documents is efficiency and transparency, and they're two words that we live by in this digital asset world, which the regulators here can't seem to figure out. But keep on top of them, and hopefully we'll get there.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. Adam, as always, mate, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And I also want to urge our viewers to check out Adam's course on digital assets and crypto education. Sign up. It's interaxis.io, and you'll learn lots and lots. So, get on top of it. Adam, thanks again, mate.
Thanks for having me, Mehdi.
We'll be back next week. Until then, good luck investing.